It sounds impossible, but there's a state where the dead are buried above ground, where nearly 100 severed heads once lined the Mississippi on pikes for 60 miles, and where one zip code carries a cancer risk almost 50 times the national average. This isn't some forgotten corner of the ancient world. This is Louisiana right now, today. Today, you'll discover 19 creepy facts about Louisiana that will completely change how you see this state. And near the end, we'll uncover a string of unsolved murders in a small bayou town where the evidence doesn't point to a serial killer. It points to the people wearing badges. Number 19. The Orange-Toothed Invaders that ate the coastline. Most people picture alligators when they think of Louisiana's swamps. But few realize the state was overrun by giant South American rodents with bright orange teeth. In 1938, Tabasco heir E.A. McElhaney set up a nutria farm on Avery Island, purchasing about 20 of the rodents through a New Orleans fur dealer. Despite the popular myth that hurricanes broke the animals free, archival research has shown that McElhaney deliberately released his stock into the marshes in 1940. With no natural predators, the population hit an estimated 20 million by the late 1950s, stripping vegetation to the roots and accelerating coastal erosion. Today, Louisiana's coastwide nutria control program pays trappers $6 per tail and removes up to 400,000 animals per season. Number 18. A werewolf that counts to 12. Deep in the bayous of Terrebonne and La Fourche parishes, Cajun parents have terrified children for centuries with stories of the rougarou, a wolf-headed man who prowls the swamps at night. The legend arrived with French-Canadian Acadian exiles who began settling in Louisiana in the 1760s, a phonetic Cajun twist on the French loup-garou, and it was weaponized by parents and Catholic priests to enforce Lenten observance. Break Lent 7 years in a row, the legend warns, and the rougarou comes for you. Folklore holds that 13 pennies at your threshold will stop the beast because it can only count to 12. A friend of mine from Houma swears his grandmother kept pennies by the front door her whole life and never once laughed about it. Today, the annual Rougarou Fest in Houma has recast the creature as a guardian of Louisiana's vanishing wetlands. Number 17. The fake vampires the tour guides won't admit are fake. If you've taken a ghost tour through the French Quarter, you've probably heard about the Carter brothers, John and Wayne Carter, who were supposedly tried and executed in 1930s New Orleans for kidnapping people and draining their blood. It's one of the most popular vampire tour stops in the city. But here's the wild part, it almost certainly never happened. Records from deathpenaltyusa.org show no Carter executed in Louisiana between 1911 and 1932. The tale is most likely a 20th century invention that the tour economy canonized as fact, a perfect example of how fictional horrors bury Louisiana's real ones. Number 16. The state that loses a football field every 100 minutes. According to U.S. Geological Survey data, Louisiana has lost roughly 2,000 square miles of coastal land since the 1930s. That's not a slow geological process. State data shows Louisiana losing approximately a football field of coastline every 100 minutes. Forecasts predict sea level rise of 1.4 to 2.7 feet by 2067, putting more than 2 million people at risk. The canals oil companies dug through the marshes accelerated the erosion, and the question of whether those companies can be held financially responsible is still in the courts. Number 15. The abandoned theme park that sat rotting for 2 decades. Six Flags New Orleans opened as Jazzland in 2000. 5 years later, Katrina flooded it, and it never reopened. For nearly 20 years, the 227-acre park sat abandoned in New Orleans East, overgrown, alligator-infested, and eerily photogenic. Urban explorers made it one of the most famous abandoned places in America. My cousin drove past it in 2019 and said the rusted roller coaster tracks poking out of the trees looked like the skeleton of something that died standing up. Demolition finally began in November 2024, and by March 2026, the site was cleared. For 2 decades, it stood as a rusting monument to the day the water came. Number 14. The funeral that summoned a hurricane. In the Montauk Swamp northwest of New Orleans lived Julia Brown, a local black healer in the village of Frenier. According to legend, she'd sit on her porch strumming a guitar and singing, "One day I'm going to die and take the whole town with me." On September 29, 1915, a Category 4 hurricane with 130-mile-per-hour winds obliterated Frenier, Ruddock, and napped it, killing an estimated 275 to 300 people. The storm hit on the day of Julia Brown's funeral. But census records show Brown was a literate landowner, a wife, and mother of 3. One first-hand account remembers her as a nice lady called Aunt Julie. The myth of her as a cursing priestess didn't surface until around 2010, which is a reminder that Louisiana's ghost stories are often retrofitted onto the lives of ordinary black women. Before we continue, subscribe if you want to keep discovering the wild side of American geography. Now, back to the countdown. Number 13, the Voodoo Queen whose tomb had to be locked away. Marie Laveau was born in 1801 and buried in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 in 1881. She wasn't a cartoon witch. She was a Creole religious leader, herbalist, and midwife who blended West African spirituality with Roman Catholicism. Her tomb became the second most visited grave in America after Elvis's. Visitors scratched 3 X marks into the plaster, spun, knocked, and shouted wishes. The vandalism grew so severe that in December 2013, someone painted the entire crypt bright pink, forcing a multi-month restoration. The cemetery was permanently closed to unguided visitors afterward. My wife visited St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 a few years back and said the energy around that tomb is something she still can't explain. The real Laveau has been flattened into a pop culture sorceress, and her resting place had to be locked away to protect it. Number 12, the Superdome's real death toll. During Katrina, an estimated 20,000 to 26,000 evacuees sheltered inside the Louisiana Superdome. Rumors spread quickly: mass murders, bodies in freezers, rampant violence. Almost none of it was true. The official death toll inside the Superdome was 6, 4 from natural causes, 1 overdose, 1 suicide. The myths overshadowed the real horror, which was far quieter. Victims across the city skewed overwhelmingly elderly, with those 75 and older dying at the highest rates, most drowning alone in their homes near breached levees. Number 11, the largest slave revolt you were never taught. On the night of January 8, 1811, an enslaved man named Charles Deslandes, who served as a slave driver on the Andre plantation, led between 200 and 500 enslaved people from German coast plantations down River Road toward New Orleans. Armed with cane knives, hoes, and axes, they marched to drums and banners. It was the largest slave revolt in United States history, larger than Nat Turner's or Denmark Vesey's. U.S. troops crushed it within 2 days. Roughly 95 rebels died in combat or execution. But the aftermath was designed to terrorize. Tribunals at Destrehan Plantation condemned dozens within hours, and by month's end, nearly 100 severed heads were mounted on pikes along the levee, stretching for miles. A naval officer described them as looking like crows sitting on long poles. Deslandes was mutilated, shot, and burned alive. The uprising was so thoroughly suppressed that most American history textbooks still don't mention it. Number 10, the bloodiest prison in America. The Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola sits on 18,000 acres of former slave plantation land, named for the African country that supplied its enslaved labor. After the Civil War, Confederate Major Samuel James leased convicts to work the same fields under conditions barely distinguishable from slavery. In 1951, conditions were so unbearable that 31 prisoners slashed their own Achilles tendons in protest, choosing permanent disability over another day. Through the 1960s and 70s, Angola earned its nickname, the bloodiest prison in America. As recently as 1992, it recorded 1,346 assaults in a single year. Number 9, the boy they electrocuted twice. Angola's electric chair was nicknamed Gruesome Gertie, and between 1941 and 1991, it killed 87 people. The case that haunts the prison's history most is Willie Francis, the 17-year-old black teenager strapped into Gertie in 1946. The execution was botched. Francis screamed, "Take it off, let me breathe." He survived. Louisiana did not show mercy. They strapped him back in a year later and killed him. Number 8, the plant that produces 99% of a carcinogen. Along the same river road where those severed heads once rotted in 1811, more than 200 petrochemical plants and refineries now line an 85-mile corridor between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, a stretch known as Cancer Alley since 1988. In St. John the Baptist Parish, the Denka DuPont neoprene plant in reserve produces 99% of the nation's chloroprene, a likely human carcinogen. According to EPA air quality assessments, the census tract closest to the plant has recorded cancer risk nearly 50 times the national average. The plant sits right next to Fifth Ward Elementary School. A 2022 peer-reviewed study attributed at least 850 cancer cases over the past decade to toxic air in the corridor. In March 2025, the Trump Justice Department dropped the Federal Clean Air Act case against Danko. The fence-line communities are disproportionately black, often descendants of people who established free towns on former plantation land after emancipation. Number 7. The worst engineering disaster in American history. Hurricane Katrina made landfall on August 29, 2005 as a Category 3 storm. But the catastrophe wasn't natural. It was engineered. Storm surge caused 53 breaches in New Orleans' federally designed flood protection system, submerging 80% of the city underwater up to 20 feet deep. The American Society of Civil Engineers called it the worst engineering catastrophe in the history of the United States. NOAA's revised death toll attributes 1,392 deaths to Katrina, with the vast majority in Louisiana. Drowning accounted for roughly a third of deaths. Nearly half died from diseases made worse by the storm. Most victims were elderly, dying alone in homes in the lower 9th Ward, Lakeview, Gentilly, and St. Bernard Parish. Number 6. The prison reopened for a new kind of prisoner. Angola's story takes a modern turn. In September 2025, the Department of Homeland Security opened Camp 57 at Angola to detain ICE prisoners. Secretary Kristi Noem explicitly cited the prison's notorious reputation as the reason for choosing it. A former slave plantation, converted into a prison synonymous with brutality, now repurposed as an immigration detention facility. The cycle at Angola never ends. Number 5. The 85 miles where people are still dying. Cancer Alley isn't history, it's accelerating. A 2025 Johns Hopkins mobile monitoring study found cancer risks in parts of Ascension and St. John parishes up to 11 times higher than the EPA's own models estimated. The same year, the federal government exempted a dozen Louisiana facilities from Biden-era pollution rules. The families in these fence-line communities didn't choose to be there. Many settled that land as free people after emancipation. The corporations came later. Number 4. America's first climate refugees. Isle de Jean Charles in Terrebonne Parish has lost 98% of its land since 1955, shrinking from 22,400 acres to roughly 320. In 2016, HUD awarded Louisiana $48 million to relocate the Isle de Jean Charles Band of Biloxi Chitimacha Choctaw, producing the first federally funded climate refugees in United States history. But the state's handling of the grant stripped the tribe of meaningful involvement. The island is still sinking, the people are still waiting. Number 3. 8 women, 0 convictions. Between May 2005 and August 2009, the bodies of 8 women were pulled from canals, swamps, and roadside ditches around Jennings, Louisiana, a town of 10,000 in Jefferson Davis Parish. Their names? Loretta Chasen Lewis, Ernestine Patterson, Kristen Gary Lopez, Whitney Dubois, Laconia Muggy Brown, Crystal Shea Benoit Zeno, Brittany Gary, and Nicole Guillory. All were sex workers who knew each other. All had served as police informants. 2 had their throats cut, the rest were too decomposed to determine the cause of death. Journalist Ethan Brown's 2016 book, Murder in the Bayou, documented what investigators themselves found. Witnesses implicating local officers, a sergeant fired after taking statements naming deputies, and investigators forced to submit their own DNA. At least 6 female inmates accused Jefferson Davis Parish jail deputies of running a sex trafficking ring. 20 years later, not one murder has produced a conviction. The parish maintains a homicide clearance rate of roughly 7% against a national average of 64. Number 2. The heads on the levee were real. Go back to fact 11 for a moment. Nearly 100 human heads, decomposing in the Louisiana sun, mounted on wooden stakes along the Mississippi River levee for miles. Not a metaphor, not a legend, documented by military officers at the time. That same stretch of River Road is the corridor where Cancer Alley now operates. The land between Baton Rouge and New Orleans has been a sacrifice zone for over 200 years, first for slavery, then for petrochemicals. The ghosts didn't leave, the industries just changed. Number 1. The real reason Louisiana feels haunted. Louisiana's darkness isn't atmospheric. It isn't accent or architecture or Spanish moss. It's the accumulated consequence of specific choices across 3 centuries. 20,000 enslaved Africans imported to New Orleans between 1790 and 1810. A sugar boom that made Louisiana the only U.S. state where enslaved deaths succeeded births. Convict leasing at Angola after emancipation. The sale of former plantation land to chemical companies who built refineries next to black communities. The federal failures that drowned a largely black city in 2005. And the ongoing protection of industries whose emissions still kill disproportionately today. The ghost stories, Laveau, the Rougarou, Julia Brown, the Carter vampires, are all the folk vocabulary a traumatized place developed to talk about what it can't otherwise process. The tourist on a French Quarter ghost tour is participating in a centuries-old tradition, turning real atrocity into consumable mystery. The most disturbing thing about Louisiana is not that it feels haunted, it's that the haunting is accurate. Which fact surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. Let's see how many of us picked the same one. If you think we missed a creepy Louisiana fact, tell us below. Let us know how many of these you already knew. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so we can keep learning together. Stick around for the next video on screen. We've got even more wild facts from across the United States.